Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another OpenShift Commons briefing. This time, we're getting a sneak preview of the upcoming releases marketplace and catalog. And Serena and Rob have both joined us today. And what we're really looking for is to show you what we're working on and get your feedback on it, and start socializing some of the ideas and concepts here. So I'm going to let Serena introduce the topic, but there will be a survey that we'll share in the chat that we're going to ask everybody to fill out and give us your feedback on, and we'll be sharing that with other folks as well afterwards. So please be sure and fill out the survey and help us make the marketplace and catalog even better. So Serena, with that, take it away.
Okay, great, thanks. I just wanted to quickly go over the agenda. So what we're going to start with is Rob is going to discuss at a high level the operator framework and how that integrates into the marketplace experience. I'm then going to go over how that marketplace experience affects the catalog experience and how the catalog is now different in upcoming releases than it was in the 3.x experience. And then really what our main focus is, like Diane mentioned, was we really want to be able to have the community and customers and users help shape the OpenShift experience. So we want to explain how you can get involved. So what that survey will actually entail is just some information from you if you're interested in talking with us in the OpenShift UX team. It's a way for you to give us your contact information, and then we will connect out with you and see if we can schedule like a half-hour or an hour conversation. Or you could even just send us an email with feedback on what you've seen today. We're trying to find the best way that we can get as much feedback on this, as this is a big change, and we want to make sure that the experience is going to be a positive one. So that's why we're trying to do this today. So I will hand over to Rob.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. So I wanted to give a brief introduction to the concept of an operator. This is really at the core of everything that we're building around the marketplace and the catalog. And at the end of the day, an operator, if you haven't heard this term before, is packaging your application such that it can be automated like a cloud service, something that you would expect to deploy or consume from Amazon or Google or Azure or any of these cloud providers. And if you think about something that when you get like a database or a queue or a machine learning service from one of these cloud providers, there's a bunch of software running behind the scenes there that is doing a ton of stuff. It provisions all the infrastructure. These are things that are all behind the scenes you don't ever get to see. They're scaling things out. They're doing failure detection and recovery. They might be doing backup. All that type of stuff is using a number of primitives that are actually available in Kubernetes. So you've got your deployments and your load balancers and secrets and config maps, and you can stitch together some really smart services. And this is what we consider an operator. Now, the great thing about that is you get this cloud-like automation, but because you're just using Kubernetes primitives at the end of the day, you're not tied to any single infrastructure provider. So you can run anywhere that you can install an OpenShift cluster, for example. You can have one of these databases, these queues, machine learning, anything that you can think under the sun. And so that is at the core of what we want to package and distribute via the marketplace and the catalog. You can go to the next slide. So we have an operator framework that helps you build this type of software. It's a new type of software, and we want to make it really easy to get started. So we have an operator SDK. This is on the build side of things. So we hook up all the magic that you need to talk to Kubernetes. There's all these things you need to watch the API and set up a bunch of scaffolding. So the idea with that is that you can come with the business logic of your application. If you're a software vendor like MongoDB, you know exactly how to deploy and manage MongoDB. And so you can bring that business logic to our SDK and quickly get started with building an operator. Now, once you have the operator built, you're not just going to run, one or two copies of this. Ideally, you're going to be running, hundreds of these things across a cluster as they're managing different dependencies for different teams. And that's where our lifecycle manager comes in. This is a tool to install and manage the lifecycle of those operators that are installed in the cluster. as well as update them. And this is key to getting new bug fixes and new features down from the the folks that really understand these operators, the MongoDBs, the Redises, and then if you're building these internally, it's a team inside of your organization. And being able to update those is how they get better over time, and that's really key to that cloud-like experience. A service that is hosted for you on a cloud, is constantly being improved, and operators are the same way. And then last, there is operator metering. And this is a Prometheus-based system that allows for usage reporting of operators and their operations cluster. So if you had a node failure and a number of operators needed to, recover from that and rebalance some data or do some other operation, they can start reporting those so you have a little bit more insight into what's going on. And this can help you as the admin of a cluster. It can also help you as a software vendor that's building an operator, seeing how it's used at scale, and then seeing, possibly how any events kind of cascade through the system. And so all three of these make up the operator framework. We have a GitHub org that's linked here if you want to check out that and some other the other tools that are there. And so these are going to form the basis of what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session. Next. And so the magical piece comes in, which is the application marketplace. And this is a place to connect operators together out to your OpenShift clusters. So, two pretty simple steps. Folks build operators with the SDK. When they're ready and stable, they will get published to the marketplace. And then the marketplace can push down both the install of those operators onto a number of your clusters running the lifecycle manager, as well as push down a stream of updates over time to those operators so that you're getting those latest bits from the software vendor that you've chosen. And then when you're going to use these on the cluster, I saw a question about how does this interact with the catalog. We're going to go over that. But basically then once they're installed on a cluster with the lifecycle manager, then you can interact with them in the catalog. Next. So there's two different personas that we're going to talk about today. There's the cluster admins and then the developers. And we think of them as separate. There's also, some use cases where those are blended depending on the team that you have. And we want to make sure that, the installation of operators and updating them is different than folks that just, want a database, they want a queue, they want, whatever the software is that's being provided by that operator. They want a monitoring stack, et cetera. So new in OpenShift will be an operators section. You can see this in the nav on the left. And this is where the cluster admin will go to kind of do everything we just talked about, manage the lifecycle of operators, see what versions are installed, see what they're actually managing for the teams inside of the cluster, and then do some access control, that type of thing. Next. So here's what that marketplace looks like and some of the other nav items in that operator section. Really quick, from top to bottom, just in the nav and explain what some of these are at a high level. So you've got the marketplace. This is kind of your shopping experience. This is where you're discovering the operators that might be available to you. Right underneath that is the cluster services. These are the operators that are actually installed on your cluster and available for teams to use. And then you've got some items that are a little bit under the hood. These are there's a concept of a catalog, so you can hook up to our marketplace, or if you wanted to make your own grouping of operators, you can totally do that. And then the subscriptions are what power the over-the-air updates, like I talked about, getting new versions of these operators updated and installed on the cluster, and some other objects like that. Then the install plan is the actual kind of audit log of what versions are installed and what's being updated currently, that type of thing. So looking at the actual marketplace itself, looks pretty familiar. It's a very modern web-based marketplace. So you've got a number of filters on the left-hand side. So if you have an engineer that needs some distributed storage for an application, you can go see what's available in the storage section. Find more information about the features of that operator, who's publishing it, some of the versions that are out there, that type of thing. And so let's say, for example, let's just dig into one of these. So if I clicked on one of these items, on the next slide, you'll see what our detail screen looks like. And this is a whole bunch of information about the Prometheus operator. It's got some information about it on the right, kind of what does it provide, why would you want to use this, who's producing it. Then a bunch of interesting metadata on the left, the number of the versions that are available. It's been certified by Red Hat, which is an important thing. It also happens to be produced by Red Hat. And it's got a container health index. So this is the grade of what containers it's using and whether it gets updated with known CVEs and that type of thing. And then some information about the code and its version. Now, if you look through all this information, you decide that, yeah, it's certified by Red Hat. It looks like I trust it. I'm ready to subscribe this, install it on my cluster. You would click that button, and then quickly choose the update channel. This is a little bit of an indirection, since that you don't want to install a specific version. You actually want to install a stream of updates over time. And so this channel is kind of the version that you would like, very similar to like how the Chrome browser is updated, that type of thing. And then the strategy for updating it, whether you want this to happen automatically or you want to, scrutinize it, test it out, and do it manually. So once you're ready, then you can click Enable, and this operator is now installed in your cluster. So that's the general admin flow, and you can imagine that doing that across all the teams that are requiring services on the cluster. And so we want to get some feedback on how you think your users today, as they use OpenShift or Kubernetes, might use this. And two of the main things are, would you want your end user to be able to kind of request an operator, view all the operators that are out there in the world, and say, hey, that MySQL operator looks really great. I don't want to be managing MySQL, or at least at a high level, I want to be doing it, but I don't want to configure the read replicas and the backups and all that. And so that's one thing. And then second is, inside of your different teams, obviously there's always different needs and skill sets, size of teams, the goals that they have. And so we're curious if you want to limit the use of operators to specific teams. You might want to let one team run MongoDB, but not the other, for example. I saw some chat. Let me catch up on that really quick.
There were a couple of questions. I think Mark's asking for some clarification. Check the chat there.
Yeah. So the first question is, why is this Kubernetes marketplace if it's just for operators? So operators are Kubernetes native. So they're taking code and capabilities that Kubernetes can do, just like setting up service discovery and all these things that you would have to reinvent yourself. It's harnessing those to run these really sophisticated application stacks. So it's, this is not an OpenShift marketplace. It appears in OpenShift, but all these operators work against any Kubernetes version, or, a range of versions depending on what APIs they use. And then it looks like there was another, more of a comment about this all kind of depends on how licensed products are going to work in this, and that is a great point. One of the benefits of our metering framework is that it will unlock a number of use cases for if you wanted to do like on-demand billing and usage-based stuff. That is really exciting for that, and this is something we're just starting to explore out as a number of ISVs want to kind of fit their business models onto this. So the service catalog in a marketplace, we're going to get to that. I think let's address that at the end once you see the service catalog flow. So maybe this is a good time to jump over to that with Serena, and then we'll circle back on these. Okay.
Great. Thanks very much. So the catalog experience is more focused on the developer for the most part. So our catalog at this point where we have it is underneath the home navigation section. And the use case is that the developer visits the catalog to discover and provision services for use with their applications, right? So in OpenShift 3.x, we had a number of things that were available in the catalog. And what we're doing in 4 is just that the catalog is going to be enhanced to also include operator-backed services. So the things that were, the content that was available before, things that were backed by the service broker, that stuff is still going to be in there. It's just that we're going to have, it's going to be enhanced with things that are operator-backed. So If the developer came into the catalog, you'd be in scope of a specific project, and then you'd have the same type of features that you saw in the marketplace, where you could filter by category, you could filter by faceted filter, you know, whether it's provider, certification level, types of services, featured services, or even filter by a keyword which would match the description, the name of the service, or labels that or tags that are associated with that. And then when you click on one of these items, and I'm going to show the case that if it was a Prometheus, if it is an operator, what you do is you would see, okay, well, here's the operator that's providing these services. And it's also, you would have a drop down that allows you to see the different types of services that you could then provision that associated with that operator. So you then select one of them, and then you would say, okay, I want that to be added to my project, and here's all the details associated with it. So the use cases or the flow is very similar in what we had in OpenShift 3, where you're still going through a guided flow, except we're not doing a wizard-based flow. We're still stepping you through that guided flow, allow you to create something, and then once it's created, we have additional questions actually on the experience. You know, for instance, once the service is provisioned, what would you expect to see, and where would you expect to go? Would you expect to still be sitting on top of the catalog? Would you expect to be pushed out to the project overview, for instance? And then there's other questions as far as discoverability. Where would you expect that quote unquote catalog to live? Does it make sense to live in the home navigation section? And even does browsing versus via categories work as expected, or filtering work as expected? Because the experience is different than what we had in 3. And we're assuming that this is an enhanced experience, but we do want to make sure that we can do some testing and validation before we get this, you know, too far through development. So I think I will open it up to more questions here, or look at the chat. So when I talk to my customers, I spend a lot of time on labels for features. It's hard with all the hype from the industry in general. This comes across to me as don't bother deploying to Kubernetes OpenShift if you don't have an operator, and have had that conversation multiple times. I think, Rob, that's probably better answered by you.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're excited about the additional automation and on both the install and the upgrade side that come from operators, but I don't think at any means are we forcing anybody to use these. And it comes down to whatever a team is specifically used to using in terms of a tool chain, if they're Ansible folks or something else like that, and whether they use Jenkins or some other hosted service or all that kind of code delivery pipeline. Really matters in getting workloads onto OpenShift, and every tool is going to be different for folks. And so yeah, I don't think there's like operators are the only thing going in the future, but we're excited to help ease some of the operational burden for building and running these like kind of infrastructure building blocks. So maybe not necessarily the code that you're deploying day to day, like your JavaScript app, but running databases and queues and smarter services for machine learning. A good example of this is in the next version of OpenShift. There is going to be a node tuning operator. This is something run by the platform that's looking at the workloads that you're running and tuning, the different parameters in the kernel or on the host to make those better, kind of just seamlessly for you. And so I think that's a good example of how operators can really do a lot of automation for you behind the scenes. And then at a very high level, you're saying, yes, I need a database. I want you to back it up at this schedule, that type of thing.
Yeah, I'd also go back to this comment too, right, where the catalog's going to be enhanced to also include operator-backed services. So we're not removing what we had before. I think one of the other things that just to note is that where I'm showing the navigation, like the screenshots that we do have of the navigation here, this stuff is all going to be RBAC. So whether or not the operator section is going to be available for developers, I think that's one of the questions we actually have, right, is do we want to expose that kind of terminology, and do we need to the end user? Is that something that should kind of be more hidden to the developer and just seen from the administrator's perspective.
Yeah, and that's a good point. All of this builds on Kubernetes RBAC. So if you want to construct really granular roles, maybe people can update and delete operators instances, but not create them, for example, or whatever. You have the full power of Kubernetes there. Go ahead, Mark.
Mark, you should be unmuted. Sorry if you're not. I'll just double check again. Mark, if you want to follow up with that question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So my point isn't on the value of operators. They're awesome, right? I mean, it's for a next step. My point is that you're showing me multiple entry points to get to application, and I at least am finding it very confusing on marketplace versus operator. They seem like two very different concepts to me. And when I go talk to a customer, they see the GUI and they're like, oh, this is awesome. I want to start onboarding my applications. Okay, great. Let's onboard XYZ application. They start going through a containerization process. It's not unusual for someone to say, well, we're not going to get any value out of this. This is a direct quote I've had with multiple customers. Somebody has said, we're not going to get any value out of this without an operator. And no, there's a lot of value you get out of this without an operator. Still a relatively new concept. And so it seems like there are a lot of entry points and a lot of different additional nomenclature that I don't know that I have the right way to word it, but it's very confusing to me as to where I'm getting value, what I'm doing, where should I start. It's just a lot, and I know this stuff pretty well, and I'm getting confused, getting lost.
Well, that's really good feedback.
That's what I was just going to say. I think that's great feedback, and honestly, I do think that's why we're trying to get more customer feedback up front this time, right? Where this is a big change for the next release. Not only is it a big change for the marketplace and the catalog, but the user experience itself is much different than what we had in previous 3.x releases, right? So the more discussions we can have like this, whether it's online in this meeting or offline with UX and PM, would be greatly appreciated, so that we can make sure that we understand what the concerns are and make any updates as needed to the experience before we get the release out.
Happy to do that. I guess my other question would be, as an ISV, along the same lines, I've got containers right now in the catalog. Am I included in this marketplace by having a container in the catalog? Do I have to build an operator for my system to be included in this new marketplace? I mean, what's the path of getting into this marketplace as an ISV?
So
Yeah.
Rob, that's probably a good one for you to take and talk about the EAP and.
Yeah, so we're going to have an EAP program kicking off here very shortly. So the way that we progressed with some of the operator partners is we had a small group of ones that we're testing out in 3.11. That's Redis, MongoDB, Dynatrace, Couchbase, and etcd and Prometheus. And then AMQ Streams, which is a Kafka product from Red Hat. And so you can try those out on 3.11 today. And so in ISV, the entry point would be through this EAP program, and they'll kind of be able to join that group of folks. And then over time, we're going to keep expanding that out and out. And
this is in addition to the partner program that I'm already a member of, or
Yeah,
going to build on that?
So Mark, basically you're ahead of the gang because you've got a certified container already, and you're already in the program, and they'll be reaching out to you to help you create the CSV file and the bits and pieces to turn it into an operator. And I put a link in the in the chat for the list some community examples of operators that are already out there, and we're hosting, if you're coming to KubeCon, there's a face-to-face Kubernetes operator workshop that I'm hosting with Rob and a bunch of other folks that's hands-on the last day of KubeCon. And the folks who are doing that, Tony Campbell and Matt Dorn, are also doing a whole bunch of virtual sessions that we're signing people up to, and we're just starting rolling all of this out. So I apologize if you didn't get any outreach yet because it hasn't been sent. But what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone who's already in the programs that we have get into the EAP and get the resources they need to make operators and or to get them into the system here the way it's set up now, if that makes sense. And Rob, if you want to add any more to that flavor.
Yeah, so like Diane said, basically having a certified container or set of containers is the first step. And then what we're going to do is use that same process to certify the operators. It's kind of a plus certification. And then your operator can use all of those certified bits under the hood, such that everything is being scanned and vetted by Red Hat and then made available to customers. Kind of the universe, if you will, of available options. The service catalog, is a set of default things that we ship inside of OpenShift, or if you install optional, like a cloud broker, you can get access to some of those cloud services. So this marketplace will be actually greater highlighting information inside of the cluster, things that are available to folks, and we hope this will, address. We have some great content in our container catalog that all of our partners have published in, and so we want to bring all that content into this marketplace, and operators are kind of the first step of that.
Yeah, I still don't understand why you have to have an operator to get there, but yeah, that's the part that I'm really having a block on is. An operator is not required to run a very successful application on either Kubernetes or OpenShift. So why does there have to be an operator? That's the part that I'm really not understanding.
Yeah, the experience that we're looking to build here is that system of updates. So being able to constantly improve these applications. And so an operator is a really great way to actually have additional logic in there, especially when you're running like a stateful service, for how to upgrade that and how to actually manage it versus just like, dumping out a container onto the cluster, which is, totally great and using like just a deployment. But this gives you a higher level of kind of productability when you're exposing that to customers. And so that's what we're trying to foster.
Serena, if you can put that survey link into the chat. Now, what we're going to ask is everybody who has any feedback, and Mark, I will definitely reach out to you right away and try and make sure that we get your feedback in, and also to do some more education. There is a lot of content around operators, around working with Helm and Ansible, and building operators. There's also an operators SIG that meets the third Friday of every month. And if you go on the YouTube channel, and when I post this video, I'll put the links to all the different, what is an operator, why is an operator, that kind of stuff there's a lot of that content already available. So we're just starting to educate the universe on this. And as I mentioned, I think in the chat earlier, at KubeCon, there will be a hands-on half-day session that's free. That's Kubernetes Operator Framework Workshop on the last Friday of the Seattle one, and we're doing some virtual ones as well. So there's lots of opportunities to get educated on operators, but I think what this is raising is some of the conceptual bits that need to be better articulated and documented and rolled out. So we've got some work to do, and that's why we're doing this today. Is there someone else with a question there? I
think there was another question earlier in the chat about just being able to distinguish between customers. Customer A should not be able to see what's available for customer B. I don't know if you saw that one, Rob.
Yeah. So if you are scoped to your project, that doesn't change. So anything that you can see inside of that, from the pods that you've run to any operators you might have access to, that is all per project. And if you have multiple projects, you can switch between those, same as normal. There is a number of ways that operators can kind of say how they want to be installed. And the main one that we're finding is for it to be installed for all users of the cluster. So you're an admin and you install it and you say, hey, make this available to everybody. This is most of the ISVs out there. And then there'll be other models of saying, oh, I want these specific projects to be able to access this operator, as well as, sometimes you have an operator that just runs behind the scenes and, is a logging stack for the cluster, for example, or something like that. And so then, that's not even exposed to anybody at all. Feel free to chime in on voice if you have another question about that.
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat beyond that. So what I'm thinking is that we, if you've got the screen link there, if you could all fill out that survey, I will thank both of our speakers for joining us today, and thank Mark a lot for his comment and his feedback from his ISV and customer perspective and community perspective. And everyone else on the call, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. And I will socialize this and hopefully we'll get some feedback. And then we'll have Serena and Rob back with when we get closer to release time, and hopefully get our documentation up to snuff to clarify all of these different aspects of service catalog, operators, and marketplaces, because it is new conceptually, and that's why we're kind of starting to try and validate it and run it by everybody. Serena, you want to add any final words?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think there's a number of questions that were brought up, which are great. And just as you noticed at this last slide, it's like we have a lot of other use cases we want to start talking about as well, which once we've got the current things to address, we've got a lot further places to go. So as we mentioned, feel free to reach out with that survey, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, and we'll definitely have a regular cadence of UXD folks talking. So I'd love to see this as maybe a monthly or bi-monthly, as you guys need it on the team. Just setting up and scheduling a bunch of these. It's really very, very good, and it's a great way to get feedback.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much.